going on, everybody? I guess we're ready to get started here. My name is Brent White. I'm going to talk to you today about skills for a red teamer, and I like to focus a lot on physical assessments. It's one of the things I enjoy most. I feel like that's more of my specialty. So we'll talk about red teaming as a whole, and then I'll also focus more on the covert physical part of assessments. So again, my name is Brent White. During this talk, I highly encourage questions, maybe even some heckling, just anything interactive to keep it fun. So if you have questions or anything, please raise your hands or, throw money or something. That's always cool too. If you have questions too, always you can follow up with me on Twitter. And I also have a website with Tim Roberts, who I do a lot of physical assessments with, reactpeople.com. If we add stuff to our physical toolkit, or if we find new exploits, things like that, we usually post it to that website. So, as you can tell from the GIFs and stuff that you have already seen, images, I'm extremely mature and highly professional in my talk. So, also, if you have ADD, I apologize, because you might not hear half the stuff I say from stupid things like this. So, what is red teaming? It's basically a group of security testers who attempt to covertly identify gaps. You hear the term red team kind of thrown around quite a bit. So you'll have a client that'll call and say, I want a red team assessment. And say, okay, so we're going to do phishing, we're going to do physical, and we'll do, external, internal. And they're like, well, I just want you to do an external and look at my website. Well, that's an external. But I want a red team. Well, that's not a red team. A red team involves different things that you can throw together to sort of simulate, real-world threats, real-world attacks. So that's something. Who all has seen the term red team basically thrown at everything? That's not really a red team. It's pretty common, yeah. So again, the client that only wants you to look at their website, but they want a red team assessment because they heard a cool buzzword at RSA that year, and now that's what they want. So I'll talk a little bit about the difference between overt assessments and all that stuff. So covert. We did this talk at DEF CON a couple years ago for SE Village called. It was about corporate espionage, and there were some trolls. It's like the short guy reads too many Tom Clancy novels. So. It's actually, I have not read any, but, a lot of the stuff that we do, we try to stay covert because, that's part of the assessment. What can you do without being compromised? So, we actually try to go in and we try to mimic someone who does not have the authority to be there. What can you do? For example, a bank, how far can you get in? Or hospitals, how deep can you get in? Can you get to PII without someone challenging you? So, I'll talk about some of those tactics and things as we move forward. So one of the biggest things that I mentioned earlier, physical assessments, that's sort of my specialty. So if you've seen some other talks too, this is Tim Roberts. We do a lot of talks and stuff together. So you'll see pictures of assessments from he and I. So again, social engineering, on-site efforts to gain better understanding of the human risks associated with face-to-face interaction, fake badges, client-side attacks. So basically, this is where when we go on-site, we try to look like we fit in. And we've had guys on our team where incident response is part of the assessment. So they will go as far as on their fake badge, they just get a piece of paper and a red crayon and they scribble on the piece of paper and then they walk around with that. This is one I actually just used last week. The client, they use cat cards. And so I got a blank cat card and I just printed out my picture and I folded it and stuck it on there. So if you look at it, even if it moves around a little bit, you can tell that that's awful, right? That looks so bad. But no one ever questioned me about it. So this is kind of the layout. They had a big picture of themselves and then a barcode like a cat card usually does, and then whatever department they were in. But it's part of the social engineering part about it, just making something look like it belongs there. And most of the time, people won't even ask you a question. So physical security bypassing, you see all this stuff on the table too. I encourage you guys, if you have questions or want to see some of it, I have it up here on the table. We do a lot of bypassing. So this is to bypass doors with the what is it, the panic bar?
Crash bar?
Yeah, smash bar, thanks. Crash bar. So you basically put this, turn it, and then you open up the door from the other side. And I'll show some pictures where we're using some of these too. Under the door tool, this is for the lever handles where you can basically put it under the door if there's enough physical gap. Pull the wire down and it opens the door handle from the other side. A few other tools like that, lock picks and things. But the way that we do assessments is we use tools that anybody can get. You don't have to have locksmith license for any of this stuff. And so we like to show like, hey, anybody can basically, if they know how to use these tools, they can come in here and do this. So this was like 15 bucks. On a door tool, I think it's like 30 pieces of plastic for like 15 bucks. So it's just to show like how easy it is to bypass these things and show the actual threat. So this picture right here, so a client that we were at, one of our trophies was to get into a room that actually housed employee files and things like that, things that employees aren't even supposed to see themselves. And so the previous year we got into this room and they're like, oh, well, we're going to fix this. So they bought this really expensive dimple lock and put it on there. And so Tim and I walked up to the door, and at the end of the hallway there was this big glass wall meeting room, and there was a meeting in place and people were kind of looking at us. And so we're sitting here at this dimple lock, and I don't know how in the heck Tim did it, but in like 3 or 4 seconds he picked this thing, and we were in there. And so, you know, we left the card, and there's a picture of Tim going through some files. And then later on, the same facility where they had also put new dimple locks, but they didn't put the strike plate correctly. I just grabbed this $2.50 Shrum tool and bypassed their, several $100 dimple lock. And we got in there, and that's me disabling video cameras. So, and again, I'm probably going to ramble a little bit because I've got some more content and stuff that I just threw in here from some recent physicals. So, any questions you guys have, please let me know. Yeah.
Do you have stats on how often, this is done in a criminal manner?
Stats on how often it's done in criminal. So,
in comparison to just
like actual assessment.
Yeah.
I don't have that from the clients that I've assessed. I mean, maybe, hopefully they don't even have those statistics. Hopefully they haven't actually been compromised physically. But that's a good question. I would imagine larger retailers and stuff would probably have statistics like that, but some of the federal clients and things, I don't know if they would even tell us if they did. So.
Right, and they're probably secret.
Yeah, and we'd be like, yeah, we had 20 people in here last month stealing stuff. So covert assessments, this is from a few weeks ago too, and this is part of OSINT, oh yeah, sorry.
Sorry, on your previous slide you mentioned phishing for remote pre-existing.
Right, oh yeah, right here.
I'm not familiar with that term. Could you explain that real quick?
Phishing?
Phishing.
Oh, it's basically where you call people, like voice calls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
So yeah, sorry about that. So I did kind of skip over some bullet points. I don't want it to really be death by PowerPoint in here. So, so open source intelligence is so basically that's where you go find intelligence about the target, and it's free. It's all open source. You can Google is your best friend here on this stuff. So I had a client, a federal client, where they were actually renting a space. It was a larger building, and they had a few different floors. And I was able to not only find out the floors they have, but the company that actually did the remodel, where they were so proud of how it looked that they had pictures of it on their website. So before I even showed up, I knew the layout and how everything looked on the floor. Then, thanks to Google Maps and some phone calls, I was able to get my hotel room on the perfect floor where I could see eye level right into their rooms here, and right up here. I couldn't, That's not because I'm short; it's because it was a tall building. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So yeah, here. So that morning I woke up. I did the Wi-Fi assessment from across the street with my Yagi antenna, and there was a cafe right here. So I walked down there and just hung out. And I was watching people go in and out, but I didn't see any badge readers on the outside. So I was like, okay, I can just walk up to that floor then. So I was watching people start. I saw I got really dizzy, so I just ran downstairs, ran across the street, and ended up piggybacking in the elevator up to let's see, this floor right here. There's like a catwalk that went up over there. So then I found out later, like you have to actually badge up to those floors, but there were so many people in there that everyone just got off of that floor. Then I tailgated in, and then I proceeded to work from a cubicle for about an hour. And so the red team part of that was I got internet access, and I was telling the guys, I was like, okay, I'm in, don't know how much time I have, give me commands to run. So they were feeding me stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How much expense do you incur on these? I mean, you said you had a hotel room across the street.
So,
Cost to do this?
yeah, so sometimes it can be a bit expensive, but we always get approval from the point of contact first. We're not just going to be like, hey, here's $8,000 for 2 days in a hotel room, and thanks for the spa treatment or anything like that. There are limits, and so we get approval for certain expenses and stuff first, obviously. So that's a good question. That if you're not careful, you're like, yeah, I rented a Mercedes from the airport and had a limo for 3 days and. Like
Cover was you were the CEO. So.
Yeah. So open source intelligence, I was able to do that. So once I got in there, I'm trying to see it. It's not. So the cubicle I was in was actually on the other side of the building. But so when I got in there, plugged in, sat down, and I was messaging the guys like, okay, because so part of a red team, it's different parts of assessments at the same time. So you have a physical going on, you might have phishing or vishing, and then an external assessment. So it's a combination of all these different attack vectors to see, okay, what can we piece from all these to try to compromise whatever is important to the company. So I was, while they were doing the external, they had found some credentials through the LinkedIn breach that were still valid from years ago, which is sad. But so that was part where the red team part came into play. So once I gained physical access, I was able to start working with the team on the outside and sending them shells, things like that. So one thing I want to point out is that you're talking about client approval. It's also very important to figure out what's in scope and what isn't. So if I'm going into a hospital, actually I'm doing an assessment at a hospital in a few weeks, and so I had to establish what is okay to take. Is anything okay to take out of the building? What rooms are okay? As part of the internal assessment, they have clearly pointed out don't touch any of the IV machines or anything like that that could really denial of service someone's life. Obviously, is a bad thing. So so you want to make sure that you know what's in scope. You want to make sure that you both understand the start and stop times. I've had a few different occasions where I've showed up to do assessments and the point of contact forgot and he was on vacation. And so that's bad. Actually, we had a guy that did an assessment and he was caught, and it took them about 2 hours to get in touch with someone that knew what was going on because the main guy was on vacation. The other 2 contacts on the letter of authorization weren't answering because they didn't feel like it, I guess. I don't know. So you want to make sure that everybody understands how important it is that someone is available. Again, it's hacking in scope. So on some of these assessments, we'll go in and they'll say, just see if you can get into a room. Don't actually, don't execute anything. Don't do anything but just proof of concept. So some clients just want to see, what could you potentially do without, all the mess. So yeah, once I get inside, is it okay if I, unplug one of your phones and then use that network jack? Some people don't want you to do that. Some want you to see, okay, yeah, what can you access? So, again, can you remove devices? If the point is, hey, can you get into our server room? Then it might be good to say, yeah, well, sure, but can I take something? It's probably not a good idea just to start unplugging stuff and removing it. That's, you probably won't get invited back. But, maybe just tell them, say, okay, could you set something aside? Maybe set a rack aside with a Post-it note on it or something. That way I know if I'm in there, which thing can I take out that's not going to piss a bunch of people off because, you unplug their domain controller or something. So, there have been times where we've gotten in, we've seen USB drives or external hard drives that are in really nice protected Pelican cases. So to me, that says this is really important data. you should probably take it, but they didn't want it out, and so, there was some damage control there. But if you have really important data lying on a desk, don't put it in a really nice Pelican case. Put it in something stupid that doesn't look important. I'm just saying. And then again, if hacking is in scope, if incident response is part of it, don't just go in and do like a wide open Nmap scan, all ports on T5 as fast as you can. If they have any sort of IDS or IPS, you're going to get picked up right away. So do some research and learn, some evasion techniques such as like, half open port scans, or changing your source port, or changing the speed, or randomizing the speed, or there's several different things you can do for evasion techniques. So that's all part of it if you're trying to avoid being caught. So one of my favorite things to do once I gain access, I like to go find somewhere and sit down and see how long I can work. So this is about 2 weeks ago. This is a conference room, so I unplugged that and I worked from there for about an hour, again with the red team. And so I was talking to the guys saying, hey, what shelves you want me to pass? Give me some stuff to look at. Same here. So it's awesome when you're walking around a building and you see a cubicle that are reserved for guests, because guests aren't familiar faces and they're open for people that aren't there all the time. I was at this place for about 2 hours and then I was done, so I started walking around and seeing what sort of doors I could avoid, things like that. This place was awesome. They gave me a couch to sit on for about 35 minutes in their lounge area without question. And I turned on some TV too, so that was fun. So another thing that we'll look for too during these assessments, physical assessments, are unlocked computers, notes on monitors, and sensitive information. I mean, this was like everything I had dreamed of in an office that was open for a physical. So not only did I pass back a shell from this to the guys on the outside, but now I have clear text credentials that I also gave them to use, and I have more info that could be potentially damaging to the client if it were out. So, and again, this is my maturity level, LOL, right? So incident response. So I know I have a backpack that's like it's like a mil-spec backpack, and I have DEF CON badges and like all sorts of things hanging off of it. It's like almost Jason Street style, but not to his level yet. But if I'm going into a place and they say, what do you have to do before someone asks you a question, then I'm going to go in there, I'm going to find everything that I can find first, and then I'm going to see how ridiculous I have to be before someone says, why the heck are you doing jumping jacks in front of our security camera? Which I'll get to that in a minute. But so here on this picture here, this is Tim and I. We did an assessment, and so we got into a place. Hey, we're here to do inventory, and we're here because we've heard complaints of slow internet speed. That's a great one to go. Everyone's like, oh, no matter where you go, oh yeah, our network is slow. We have problems with it. Like, oh, well, let me help you. So there's Tim. Here's the employee, and he is plugging in a keylogger. Now, excuse me, we're here. I need to do some speed tests. Would you mind locking your machine? I need to put this device on here. It'll, measure some speed metrics, things like that. We're trying to run fiber. All these terms, like, okay, sure. So while he's doing that, she has a picture of her kid over here in a soccer uniform. So I'm like, oh, soccer. I have a daughter. Like, she plays soccer too. And, oh, that's awesome. Let's be friends. And so you establish this trust. And that sounds awful every time I tell that story. Because, so that's something else too. After the assessments, if I have a chance, I always like to go back and apologize to people that I've blatantly lied to, because I don't like to be that guy. But so anyway, the social engineering part, we're building the rapport about soccer with kids, and so Tim's like, okay, this device is installed. Can you go ahead and unlock your machine now? So she types her password in, like there's our credentials right away. So so we sit there and we're talking, and then he unplugs the device, and we send that, give that to the guys externally, and of course that's another foothold for them for the red team engagement. And this one too, this is another room for client data. It's PII. files, filing cabinets, things like that. So we get in the place, we go through, they have a training room, it's about the size of this. So they would have a door like that, and they had a desk in front of it. So we just moved the desk and it goes right into this room. But on the other side, they had a biometric reader and all this stuff. You know, it's like super fancy. So we go and they're like, are you kidding me? Like, what is this stuff? So we start, open the filing cabinets and taking pictures. And so when we're done, we do the overt part of the walkthrough where the client actually escorts us through and we see things we might have missed while we were trying to sneak around. And so we go to the door on the other side, the one that's protected, and they're like, no, we can't take you in there. That room is too sensitive. And they're like, well, are you sure? They're like, yeah, we can't let you in there. I'm like, okay, well, we've already been there. You'll see it in the report. So, yeah, we like to have fun with that stuff. So, and again, if incident response, like how ridiculous do you have to be to see until someone asks you a question? So doing jumping jacks in front of the security camera, was actually doing an assessment where they're like, okay, we only have one building or one floor on this building, and you have to have a badge to get in there. And we have a security guard who's always watching the place. And like, okay, that's going to be tough. Smaller buildings like that, the ones that just have floors, there's maybe 20, 30 employees usually, and they all know each other. So if you're a new face, then you're going to stand out. So waited till after hours, went up the stairwell because we weren't able to clone a badge. So we went up the stairwell, and they had the Kava style lock, where it's like the 4-button, the pin pads, like 4 buttons, and then the handle. Tried to pick the lock real quick, but I didn't want to take the chance of breaking it, and I didn't pick it. It's really my excuse. So, I pull out a notepad, and a guy I'm working with, we start trying. So every combination, people love patterns. So every combination he tried, I wrote it down. On our 13th try, we guessed it. So we're in the building, the cleaning crew just waves at us, and we're like, hey, how's it going? So we walk around, we do everything. I mean, we're in this place for like 2 hours. We're picking locks or shredder bins, we're going into their server room. We go to every single cubicle just to see if we can get every single cubicle. And we did. By the way, always look under keyboards for post-its with passwords. People love to hide them. So I'm like, where is the security guard? They're supposed to be monitoring this all the time. So after this, when we're done, we go to the front, the main door. It's like these double glass doors. And there was a big enough gap. So I had this, and I put Starbucks napkins on the end of it. And so I'm standing there in front of the door, like doing this all the way up and down to see if I could get the request to exit sensor to trip on the other side. But it doesn't. So the security camera's right behind us, and it saw us. If someone was watching it, it would see us like with this metal thing going up and down the door. So we stood there and we waited, and we're actually like checking email on our phones and just waiting to see. And like, well, let's do jumping jacks or something. I'm getting tired. And coworker Steve was like, okay. So we literally turn around and look at the camera, and we're doing jumping jacks. And we start to break. I think we did it for maybe a minute, and we're like, okay, let's just go. So nobody ever showed up. So that was a finding.
Maybe somebody's out of job.
Probably, yeah. We have, as far as security guards, we actually have a talk, Tim and I, from these assessments called Security Guards LOL. And we actually point out, because we like to go after, we're not making fun of security guards by any means. They're, highly necessary. But it's just, we kind of like to pick on them because if you have a big building, you have 1, maybe 2 security guards. Basically, the entire physical security rests on these 2 security guards that are usually, minimum wage or a bit more in some places. But once you're able to establish trust with them, you can basically do anything you want. So, overt assessments, we talk about shredder bins. Love to find shredder bins. Put your hand in there, pull out a big stack. We call it shredder bin bingo, just to see if you get something good on the first grab. So, they actually upgraded the lock on this one, but, it's still a crappy trash can, so you just lift the side up and stick your hand in there anyway. And this is Tim. He's on top of a vending machine, and their server room's over here. So there's a gap where he was able to get up and get over in there. But the worst part, it gets worse, Right here is the door in and out of the lunchroom, and this was at lunchtime when it was busy traffic. And hey, why are you up there on top of that machine with your head in the ceiling? No one ever said anything. So, yeah, seriously. So we just like to put fun pictures like that. And again, I'll get to in the talk, like how far should you go, things like that. We're not really sure yet, obviously. So when you're doing the walkthrough, we have a checklist. There's usually a standard methodology of things to look for. Sensitive areas, high-risk areas. You want to see, okay, the physical controls. You want to look at, are the locks, installed properly? Are the strike plates installed properly? Rec sensors, are they pointed down close enough where if you spray canned air through the door crack that it's going to open for you? Do you need to have it further back? Man traps. So there's all these different physical controls that you want to check while you're doing the walkthrough with the client that maybe you didn't have time to look at while you were being covert, or maybe you just have a chance to duplicate like the issue to them. Say, here's how I bypass this. A few weeks ago, one of the clients that used the CAT card that I used that really crappy fake one for, tailgated in. Outside of a door, they actually had a sign on there that said secret comms room. It was like, okay. So I had this in my suit pocket, just a piece of plastic. Just pull it out, pin pad, all that stuff. I didn't care that the lock wasn't set correctly. So I go in there, and then inside of that room, it said top secret ops room. Okay, so the door, I've never seen one of these on an actual door before, but it was like, on a combination on a safe, you actually turn it and it's digital. So they had that on there, and on the right they had the biometric fingerprint reader with the pin pad. It's like, okay, let's try it out just to see. And then there it was, like right in there. So a client wasn't very happy about all of that. Like $30,000, I think they said, worth of equipment for a door, and 75 cents worth of plastic. So good things to look for. They did fix it while I was there. I actually watched them fix it, and I couldn't get back in there, so that was cool. Let's see, I think this is a video. This is part of an walkthrough where this is back. So that's Tim right here. This is the back entrance. The security camera had been weather worn, so it's super fogged over. You couldn't see anything. So like, okay, well, let's go in there. So in just a couple seconds. So and there we go. And they had pin pad and everything, and so just a bigger version of this that you used to get in there. So, and it's just good to be able to walk the client through and show things. And here's another thing too. This is the badge cloner, Proxmart 3. So cloned a security guard. Cloned a security guard's badge for this man. It was the turnstile. So. So you had to go through these turnstiles, and you can see there's the glass doors right here. And there he goes, and the door opened, and he was on through. So it's always good to have little videos like that too.
How did you get the security guard's badge to clone it?
So let me see, I think there might be a picture on here that shows exactly what that is, where that came from. So it's a clipboard. It's one of those clipboards that opens up. And on the inside of the clipboard, it has all those components. And so you can just brush up near someone, like if you're in the lunch line or something, you just brush up next to them, kind of like that, and get the badge. So some of them work up to like 3 feet away. And again, that's actually the picture that I used. And Ken Adams, that's from the show Friends. My wife and I like to watch that a lot. So. So we have a guy that worked for us named Drew, and he looks a little bit like Alec Baldwin. And so on the badges that we make for him, we always put Alec Baldwin's picture on there, and no one ever says anything. So, again, overt assessments. This Tim is using the under the door tool that I have there. These things are good, but if you're trying to be quiet, it's usually not the best idea because if it's a metal door, it's a very loud scraping sound. Plus, if there's people on the other side and they see this metal thing come up from under the doors, so they'll be like, what is going on? So just, a word of caution there. Same with bump keys. I don't like to use bump keys at all. I think there are more quiet ways, and plus they have the potential to damage the keyway. Again, here is, so rec sensor right here was pointed down towards the door enough where we could spray canned air. You can see the mist coming through and hitting the sensor, and then we just walk right in. So just things to look for.
What did the canned air do?
So compressed air, you turn it upside down where it kind of shoots the smoke out. So all those particles, they go through there, and a lot of rec sensors pick it up, and the door will open for you. Or vape.
think it's a fire or motion goes to the motion?
Yeah, it's just motion, and so it's something to do with like the temperature of the little water molecules. Because if you just point a laser pointer or just any motion at it, good ones, they won't open. So it has to have some sort of temperature variation in there as well, and so the canned air does that. Vape does it as well, or there's a video with Dave Kennedy where he actually has a vape cigarette and he blows it through the door and then he goes in, similar to that. There's also a cool video from Deviant Olem, I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, where he's outside of a bank and he has a glass of bourbon and he drinks it and he like spits it out of his mouth like like the mist, like when you're fire breathing and all that stuff. But he spits it through the door and gets the sensor to open and just walks right in with whiskey. So.
I think the vaping thing will happen in the movie, so maybe Mr. Red.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean it's a pretty common thing, and it's it's easier to carry a vape around than a big can of compressed air.
Plus you look cool.
Yeah, and then when you walk to the other side, you don't have all the bitterants in your mouth from the canned air, which tastes awful. All right, hybrid assessment. So again, talk about red team, a client that only wanted us to look at a web app and external. That's not quite a red team. So you got to add more real world things in there, like the phishing attempts or the actual physical pen test, things like that. Something that's going to simulate a real world attack from a group of people that want to come in and try to compromise your company in any way that they can. They're not just going to sit behind keyboards sometimes. They're going to get up and go and see if they can actually get in and con your people out of whatever they can. So inside man, outside man. So again, as I was talking about before, whenever I'd get inside and I would start talking to the outside guys, okay, where do you want me to send these shells? What commands do you want me to run? What do you want me to start looking for? Things like that. That's more of a red team type assessment where you're collaborating and doing whatever you can to get whatever information is considered a trophy. Drops, rogue APs, like the Pony Express, drop boxes, or I actually have this guy now in my toolkit. It's like this super tiny computer, it's touchscreen. So if I go in somewhere and I don't want to carry a big computer bag, I'll have like my lock picks and my Lloyd tools in my suit pockets, and then I'll have this thing on the small of my back. That way if I do get in somewhere and get into a conference room or something, I just pull this out and I can run a script where I can turn it into a tap device, or I can start trying to do an assessment from there without carrying, this big thing around. So
What is that model?
this is the GPD mini laptop. I think it's been out for a couple months. But there's a mod that you have to, it comes with Windows, but there's actual mod on GitHub where you can run, install Ubuntu over it as the base OS, and it actually works pretty well. Let's see.
And what do you use as drops these days?
Pony Express has some good ones, or I know you can build little devices. So also have the Raspberry Pi. So there are a lot of different hardware options that will work. They'll run enough to to call back to whatever you want it to. And I know Dave at TrustedSec released it, the TAP software that we actually use a lot. It's kind of like a self-healing
Yeah.
tap, so you just plug it
Whatever
in.
thing.
Yeah, no, that's a C2
Oh, okay.
command control, but there's actually software. It's the TrustedSec Tap, and so you just install it on something like a Raspberry Pi or whatever hardware, and you just configure it. And all you have to do is power it up, plug it in, and you can leave. And if there are any issues, the way he coded it's basically like self-healing software where it can just fix itself and still call back. So a lot of different options with that. I know like the phone plugs and stuff are pretty expensive, like $600 to $800 or more. But you can build something like that for $40.
My concern is like Logan WRT being unsupported basically, and everything running now.
Right.
On the shell boxes, is it time to move off of that and move to?
So yeah, I mean it's trial and error. I mean a lot of people are releasing different things. I think that the NSA actually released Dropbox code and like personal VPNs, things like that, about a year or so ago. That actually works pretty well. It just depends on, I guess, your environment and your hardware. So there's plenty of options to play with. So.
Have you ever had somebody start asking questions and then say, well, I'm a security consultant, and they say, oh, okay.
Oh yeah. So the question has anybody ever started asking me questions? Absolutely. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to carry a fake letter, and the fake letter looks like it has the company letterhead from the logo I found off Google. It says so and so is a third-party contractor here on this date to do inventory and assess internet speeds. Because again, that's a great story that people always have internet speed problems. And so you show that to them, like, well, why are you here? I'm like, oh, I'm a contractor. Here's my business card, and just here looking at a few things. I'll be done in about an hour. Okay, cool. So I've even had people like, well, can I keep this letter? I'm like, sure, you can keep the letter. And so I'll go around, and about an hour or so later, they actually come find me and be like, hey, the point of contact on here is not in our Active Directory. Could you come with me till I verify? And we're like, oh, crap. All right. So there are times. Tim has a funny story where he was picking a lock. Security guard came up behind him, like snuck up behind him. He didn't know he was there. And it's like, what are you doing? Tim's like, I'm just testing locks and making sure everything's set up correctly. No, you're not. Yeah, I am. Like, no, you're not. And he's like, okay, you caught me. So he pulls out the fake letter, and on this we have the address of the company is the White House address, and it's a lot of like really bad information. If you actually read it, you would know something's off. Again, for incident response testing. So the guy was like, oh, cool, I'm in security too. He's like the security guard. He's like, Tim's like, yeah, me too. So they were buddies because they were both in security. And so Tim tells him like, hey, could you do me a favor? I'm going to be here for the rest of the day looking at stuff. Could you let the other guys know? That way, I can just keep working. I'm like, sure, I'll let them know. So through that entire facility, they actually had several security guards, and he had free reign for the rest of the day for that. So word of caution on that too. Fake letters. If you get caught and you say, oh, here's my letter, and they say, this is stupid, I'm not buying it. If you try to pull out another letter, that's the real one, it's never going to be like, no, come on. They're not going to read anything after that. So that's, I've actually been in that situation before. So, like David, they contact the point of contact, and you wait a while, and things get sorted out, So, but if you're like David Copperfield, where you're pulling letter after letter, yeah. So just words of caution for that too. I love fake letters; they're great, but just be prepared. If the first one doesn't work, likely the second one will just cause more problems for that time. So, and something else too, you kind of remind me of that with that question, getting caught. We always put verbiage in there that the client will go to any means necessary to ensure that we're not apprehended by local, state, or federal authorities, which is great because, lawsuits and stuff. So, and nobody wants to be arrested. So,
Have you been arrested?
I have not yet. Dave Kennedy and Paul Kolwitz were doing an assessment, after hours assessment, and armed security guards. So they got around and they found out during the debrief the next day they actually tripped a silent alarm, and they were told by the security guards, if we would have seen you, we would have fired at you. And so from that point, at that point on, they no longer do physical assessments at places after dark where there are armed guards, and I thank them for that. So bold versus safe. Again, another security guard story. That's Tim right there. We got into the building. I'd been there for a while, and we're like, okay, well, we need to get to the security control room, and we don't have keys. And Tim's like, the security guard has keys. I'm like, that's true. Let's go. So we go up to the front where the security guard is, right here. Tim says, I'm here doing badge inventory. Here's my badge. And it was a contractor badge that we had stolen from the badge room that we gained access to from bypassing the lock. So we showed him the badge. I'm sitting here. That's me talking to the lady. I'm in a suit, so I was one of the higher ups there for that. It's like, yeah, he'll be here just for a minute, and then we've got to go to the other location. So it's like, oh, okay, it's cool. So this is an awful voice. I know I did that voice. But so he's sitting here, and he has the clipboard that reads badges. I'm trying to see if it's in one of the pictures. I think it's like over here or something. So maybe that's the edge of it. But so she's like, yeah, we have a big binder full, and the binder was this thick, and it had visitor badges and contractor badges. And so Tim's like, well, this is probably going to take me a while. I was like, yeah, why don't you go over there and sit down? So she lets him come around the side, and he's sitting down back there with her. And we have another picture. He has his feet propped up on the desk over here with the binder. And the funny thing about it, I guess the sad thing about it, so he has the clipboard like this, and every badge he would get, it's like hard plastic against a plastic badge. You can't just do that and then it clones it. So he would get a badge, and he would rub it like this, and he would set it down and get another one while he was talking to me. Like, yeah, so how's everything going? Seriously, like 15 badges at least, and she doesn't even think, like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you rubbing the badges like that? So, so we do that, and then he has a big ring of bump keys, and he's like, hey, so-and-so, I've got to do key inventory now, but so-and-so told me to get the keys from you because he didn't have his with him. She kind of looks at him. She's like, okay. And he's like, well, I can leave my keys with you if you'd like, and we can exchange keys because I need my keys too. So she's like, all right. So he gives her his bump keys and gets her entire ring of keys. She's like, just come back before 5 because that's when I leave. And I'm like, got it, dude. So we run downstairs. This is actually one of my favorite assessments so far. We run downstairs. The security control room was right across from the server room on the lower floor. Their maintenance staff also acted as security guards, so they were kind of eyeballing us all day, like they knew something was off, but not enough to actually come ask us a question. So we get to the security control room, and there's glass window pane, and the lights were off, so no one was in there. We have all his keys, and he's sitting there trying to figure out which one, and the timing could not have been more perfect because as soon as he got the right key and opened the door, one of the guys started coming around the corner, and we ducked in this room, and we thought for sure he saw us. So we're like, oh crap. So we ducked under the table. It was like an L-shaped desk. We both squeezed under this table looking at the door, just waiting for him to come in there. And I was like, Tim, what are we going to do if this guy comes in here? And he was like, yell surprise? I don't know. Luckily, he never came in there. We picked the lock to their lockbox. At that point, we had access to any company vehicle or whatever, all thanks to the security guard giving us the keys. So, yeah. So, we're talking about when should we move on to something else? So we've had times where we've tried to push it and they're not buying it, and we're like, no, but seriously, like I really need to do this. I'm going to lose my job. And you can tell they're getting irritated and they're just not buying it. And there's just the whole like guard wants to punch me in the face right now, which I thought was going to happen at one point. I'm glad it didn't because the dude was huge. And then they're like, okay, what are you doing here? So when you're caught, what? For the record, I had many more things like this, but I deleted them because I didn't want to forget what I was talking about during the talk. So, again, always make sure that the point of contact is accessible. You don't want to be sitting there for hours or potentially arrested waiting for someone to answer the phone and say, it's cool, he's supposed to be there. Yeah, make sure they didn't forget you're doing the assessment that week. That should be pretty obvious, but they do forget because they're super busy too, right? So legitimate letter of authorization, make sure you always have that and that it's signed by the client. So there have been times where one of the assessments where they used the CAT card like this. This building was one of the most secure places I've ever seen in my life. So even to get to the receptionist, I had to piggyback into the receptionist area. It was the most like socially aware company I've ever been in. Everyone looked at everything. So I piggyback off this guy at lunchtime. He sees me do it. He stops and turns around and looks at me until I start talking to the receptionist. So at that point, I show her my fake letter. I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm here to do inventory. Here's the information. And so I had a real client contact on there, but I had the phone number of one of our red team guys who was ready to answer the phone. So she looks at the company directory and calls the legitimate number, and he's in a meeting. He'll be done in 5 minutes. Like, oh, well, I haven't had lunch yet. I can just go eat and come back. Well, it's okay. You can wait for 5 minutes. And I was like, well, I'm not in a big hurry. You know, I appreciate your time. I'll just swing by. Are you hungry? Do you want anything? No, I'm good. Thanks. So I just, turn around and walk out and call my the head of the assessment. I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So, because I didn't want to raise suspicion, like, hey, there's some guys here trying to get in. So you have to know if you are compromised, you got to be able to bow out gracefully without raising flags. So
if you're like super good at this, you still shouldn't expect a 100% success rate.
No, I mean maybe for some other people, but I think real life, I mean you're going to have different maturity levels of clients and their physical security. There are some places where you can go, and there's one where we got in and I was like, oh, I forgot my lockpick. So I went back out to the car and had to tailgate and break back in again just to get back to where I was. And actually then we went to lunch and we did it again. But then there are places like this where, I mean, if you can't clone a badge or, something, like it's going to be tough. So getting caught, that's more of like a, hey, good for you, client. Like, good job that you didn't totally suck it up. So it's actually kind of refreshing sometimes to go into a place like that, because after you do so many of them, you're like, does anybody care about anything anymore? And you go to a place like this, and it's like, oh, that's actually pretty nice. Like, this is how you should do it. So.
Okay. After you get caught, let's say you're early on in the process, does the person that caught you kind of come onto to your side as to pretend that they know?
So the question was, when I'm caught, does the person that caught me usually sort of come onto my side to let me continue? There's a lot of different things that could happen. It depends on what the client wants. Sometimes once you're caught, then they want you to be done. Other times, if you're caught, then that person, you can say, well, hey, here's where it says I can continue, and then they will be quiet and let you continue. That doesn't happen a lot. Or one of the more normal things one of the things I like to do once I'm caught, I'll call the contact and say, hey, I was doing this, I was compromised, and then I will do a guided walkthrough with them for places that maybe I wasn't able to get to initially, just so that I can, be fair and say, be able to look at all the doors and their physical controls outside of areas I couldn't access. So.
I worked at a small hosting company, and a guy showed up kind of with an inventory and it'd be sort of similar story. Of course, we didn't pay for it.
Yeah, don't believe him.
Or whatever. Did we have the right to detain him?
I wouldn't say detain. You do have the right, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so you want to actually speak with a lawyer, but from what I understand, you have the right to ask them to leave, or if you think something has happened already, you can ask them to wait and then call law enforcement to come, but you can't tie them to a chair or anything like that. So,
beat him up.
Yeah, thankfully you can't. Picking. She's busy shitting here. Lock picking bypass methods. So you want to be sure that you know what you're doing. You don't want to get, hey, my lockpick set from Sparrows just came in and I've got an assessment tomorrow. Let's go see what happens. That's not going to work out very well when you have to go through and replace locks because your pick's broken them. because you didn't know what you were doing, make sure you practice that stuff outside before you go try it on the client side. Same with exploits. You don't want to like, hey, I just downloaded a bunch of exploits from Anonymous. I'm going to go try them on this client network tomorrow. Make sure you know what your tools are doing, whether it's software or hardware bypass, things like that. Practice these things in a lab. Make sure that way when you do show up on site and you have the chance to use them, you can actually use them the way they're intended and not causing more issues for the client. Baseline skill sets, yeah. So how stupid, I mean, from a security standpoint, can anybody see this new thing Amazon's wanted to do for delivery guys? I mean, does anybody think that's a great idea?
It's going to spread the flu like wildfire.
Yeah, like this.
Makes drones look like a good idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
anyway.
So now think about it, like if you live in a place, like a high crime neighborhood, your risk model might be, it's better to let the guy in my house than leave a package outside.
Proven it doesn't go.
Nobody would look towards it. You shouldn't live anywhere near your house.
I'm just saying, like if you live in a
And it's on your porch and somebody steals it anyway?
I mean, if you live in downtown New York and you have a package on your porch all day long, it's probably not gonna be there when you get home.
That's true, yeah.
The Amazon, or is really FedEx or UPS, they're background checked, and you're already trusting them not to steal your packages.
Right.
And
Yeah,
they
that's
never know
true.
if you got a camera besides, they're being, driven so hard by data analytics, they don't have time to rummage around your place. They got to get to the next delivery to make their money.
So I'm gonna make two disclaimers. One, I don't work at Amazon. And two, I don't think that's a good idea for me.
Right.
But I can see in some people.
Certain areas it
Yeah.
can be beneficial, yeah, I can see that. I will never try it though.
Yes, but there's a way that even if they don't have the time to do it themselves, they can basically write down whether your house looks like it would be a good mark, and then people can come by later.
Or open it for their buddy who's there waiting to issue.
Exactly.
This conversation could go south. So let's
I
get,
think your point and the whole electronic capability to do that too.
for the sake of squirrels, I'm going to continue real quick. But seriously, that's a great conversation that I do want to have because it just, what? Seriously. So professional baseline skill sets. So if you're not comfortable with lying to people, which sounds awful saying because it's part of the job, take some improv classes. If you don't want to take improv classes, go to the mall or the airport, sit down next to a stranger and have an entire conversation, but never tell them the truth about anything. Like seriously, like make up a whole thing because then it kind of helps you get more comfortable with, shooting off the cuff with remarks and things like that, trying to keep up with what you say. Those are just some good free ways to practice developing your skill set for social engineering. And that even helps too if you're doing phishing calls where you're calling people trying to get them to divulge information. That also helps with that as well because they'll be able to detect the nervousness in your voice. Specific areas of concern. So again, this probably should have been earlier in the talk, but before you start the assessment, make sure you know, hey, what are the trophies? Domain admin might not necessarily be the main goal here. If it's if it's a bank, what would be the worst thing that somebody could get at a bank or a hospital or whatever it is? You've got to think what would be the most damaging things for this company to lose. Talk that over with the client and figure out what are your main goals here. And I'm kind of getting close on time here. So I'm going to kind of skip through. Incident response testing again. Are you trying to not get caught or are you trying to see what it takes to get caught? Practical versus impractical. Bags, tools, appearance. So again, I have the tactical bag I mentioned with all the badges and stuff. Those things usually don't work well for federal clients or law firms or other things. Or there could be other places where nobody cares. It doesn't matter. Just consider the environment. In the large backpacks, sometimes you don't really want to stand out unless you're trying to stand out. Like Jason Street, sometimes when he does these physicals, he wears these bright yellow pajama pants with minions all over them and walks around in flip-flops, in places that everyone's wearing suits. This is Tim's, he has a picture of his up here because he wasn't able to do the talk with me, but this is all his stuff and it fits in his Maxpedition bag. Oh, here's the clipboard, it's open. So there are the readers. You just close the lid, and yeah. So there's a picture of the clipboard for you. All of my tools are up here. You're more than welcome to come look again. Example toolkits. Probably take pictures of these slides because our time's almost up. Or you can pause the video later. And then here's another toolkit example. Net Hunter tablets. Again, this is kind of my version of a Net Hunter because it actually has a keyboard instead of trying to tap on or type on a little tablet thing. Real letter of authorization, RFID, thief, cloner. So many options for those things now. Hand warmers, canned air, vape. Hand warmers, sometimes if it looks for temperature controls and you put it on the other end of your under the door tool and it sees that temperature variation, then a hand warmer can help with that. So I think we just died here. So anyway, I'm not sure what happened, but I think that's pretty much all the time that I have. So anybody, if you have questions, please let me know. But thank you guys for listening today.